We've all heard the saying, actions speak louder than words. But what if words actually reveal more than we think? This week's readings challenge us to look closely at the power of words, how they reflect what's inside us, how they shape the world around us, and how they expose the true nature of those in positions of leadership. Welcome to Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be taking a look at 3 readings from the Christian Bible through the lens of sacred myth. As we reflect on the readings for the 8th Sunday in Ordinary Time, we're going to look beyond the traditional Christian narrative to uncover a few lessons that should resonate with all of us, regardless of our religious background or lack thereof. In this episode, we'll get a reminder that what people say over time will eventually reveal what's in their hearts. We'll see that when we hold on to our values, no external force can take them from us. But we need to beware of hypocrisy, because, let's be honest, it's easier to call out the faults of others than to take a hard look at ourselves. If our words reveal who we truly are, then what are we saying about ourselves? And just as importantly, what are the people in power revealing about themselves with every speech, every promise, every lie, and every excuse? If we want to lead, whether in big ways or small, we need to make sure we're leading with integrity. So grab a comfy seat, a glass of your favorite beverage, and let's look at some ancient stories together in this edition of Mythologizing the Bible, where we'll be exploring the readings for the 8th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Cycle C of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. In this series, we're exploring readings from the Bible through the lens of sacred myth, looking for interpretations and lessons that don't demand a belief in the supernatural. What that means from a practical standpoint is that we will assume that these stories and writings are fiction, written by pre-scientific people who were just trying to make sense of the universe. So you might agree with the lessons I find, but I encourage you to look for something that rings true to you. Part of the beauty of understanding these writings as sacred myths is that we're free to interpret them for ourselves. We're free to learn the lessons that we need right now. And with that, let's dive in. As I said, tonight we'll be looking at the readings for the 8th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Cycle C. Our first reading is from the book of Sirach. It's chapter 27, verses 4 through 7. Our second reading is from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 15, verses 54 through 58. And our gospel reading is from Luke. It's chapter 6, verses 39 through 45. Now we'll start by going through all 3 of the readings, then we'll look for the messages and the main lesson in each one, and finally we'll bring everything together, look at what it means for us today, and talk about where we go from here. And with that, let's begin. Our first reading is from the book of Sirach. When a sieve is shaken, the refuse appears. So do a person's faults when he speaks. The kiln tests the potter's vessels, so the test of a person is in his conversation. Its fruit discloses the cultivation of a tree. So a person's speech discloses the cultivation of his mind. Do not praise anyone before he speaks, for this is the way people are tested. Our second reading is from the first letter to the Corinthians. Brothers and sisters, when this perishable body puts on imperishability, and this mortal body puts on immortality, then the saying that is written will be fulfilled. Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, my beloved, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the work of the Lord, because you know that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. Our gospel reading is from Luke. Jesus told them a parable. Can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into a pit? A disciple is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully qualified will be like the teacher. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbor, "Friend, let me take out the speck in your eye," when you yourself do not see the log in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. No good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit, for each tree is known by its own fruit. Figs are not gathered from thorns, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. The good person out of the good treasure of the heart produces good, and the evil person out of evil treasure produces evil. For it is out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. All right, so let's go back and take a bit of a critical look at these readings and see what learnings and lessons we can find if we dig around just a little bit. So our first reading was from the book of Sirach. And in this reading, we get a common sense lesson. We often like to believe that we can judge people by their actions alone, but Sirach reminds us that words are just as revealing. The passage gives us three powerful metaphors: a sieve that separates the good from the refuse, a potter's kiln that tests the integrity of the clay, and a tree's fruit that reveals the care that tree has received. These are all ways to say that time and pressure will eventually expose what's inside. And the same is true for people. When someone speaks long enough, their true nature is going to come out. Words aren't just noise. They really are a window into someone's values, their priorities, and their beliefs. This is especially relevant today when so many people just excuse harmful rhetoric by claiming, "Oh, well, that's not what they really meant," or they were just joking. But the reality is, when someone repeatedly says things that are racist, sexist, cruel, or just dishonest, those words are revealing something deeper. If a leader or public figure constantly speaks with anger or deception or disdain for others, that's not an accident. It's a reflection of who they are. Sirach's wisdom tells us that we don't need to search for hidden meanings or give endless benefit of the doubt. Just listen. People reveal themselves if we're paying attention. This is particularly important when it comes to political and religious leaders. Many self-proclaimed Christians follow leaders who contradict everything Jesus supposedly taught. Leaders who spread division, who promote cruelty and blatantly lie. And yet their followers continue to excuse it. But Sirach is clear. Words reveal the heart. If someone constantly spews hatred or deception, we have to stop making excuses for them and recognize the truth of who they are. So the main lesson I got from our first reading is that words eventually reveal a person's true intentions. We get to know people by listening to them, and sooner or later, their words are going to reveal what's really in their hearts. If we want to build a just and ethical society, we have to take words seriously. Not just our own, but the words of those we put in positions of power. If someone is showing us who they really are through their speech, we should believe them. Because, as this reading points out, Words eventually reveal a person's true intentions. Our second reading was from the first letter to the Corinthians. And this reading was deeply rooted in religious dogma, focusing on victory over sin and death through Jesus. But let's strip that away and get to the core of what Paul was really trying to do. Paul was offering reassurance to an oppressed people. He was telling them, the people in Corinth, the Christians in Corinth, he was telling them that no matter how difficult life got, they had a reason to persevere because, in his view, Jesus had already won. Now, whether or not we believe in that particular framing, the underlying message, I think it's something we can work with. Hope strengthens resilience. When people are struggling, they need something to hold on to, something that keeps them moving forward. That doesn't have to be supernatural. It can be something very real. Our values, our integrity, our commitment to doing what's right. We don't control what happens to us, but we do control how we respond. We control our choices, our actions, and how we carry ourselves in the face of difficulty. This is why core values matter. When we know what we stand for, whether it's fairness, justice, kindness, or truth, we can take pride in holding on to those values even when the world around us is chaotic. Paul was talking about sin and death. But let's reframe that. What if we think about it in terms of personal integrity? When we live according to our values, we are undefeated because no one can force us to compromise who we are. So instead of doing the work of the Lord, as Paul puts it, we can be steadfast in doing the work of personal integrity. And when we do that, we don't need external validation or supernatural promises. We can find strength in knowing that we're doing our best. We're staying true to ourselves, and we're contributing to a world that reflects our values. That's real hope. That's real victory. So the main lesson I got from our second reading is that no one can take your core values away. Paul was trying to tell people that no matter what happens, they should hold on to their faith. But we don't need faith in the supernatural to hold on to something just as powerful, our values. No one can take away the principles we live by, no matter how much pressure we face. When we're steadfast in what we know is right, we can face challenges with confidence, knowing that we're standing on solid ground, because no one can take your core values away. Okay, our final reading was from the Gospel of Luke. And in this passage, Jesus uses three analogies to warn against hypocrisy. The first, about the blind leading the blind, is pretty straightforward. Leaders who don't acknowledge their own ignorance can't effectively guide others. The second, about removing the log from your own eye before pointing out the speck in someone else's, well, it reminds us how easy it is to see flaws in others while just flat out ignoring our own. The third analogy was about the good and bad fruit, and that highlights that the real test of a person's character isn't just what they say, but what they produce in their words and actions. So taken together, these ideas form a powerful message. Leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about self-awareness, accountability, and a commitment to continuous positive growth. The idea that everyone who is fully qualified will be like the teacher, well, that's interesting. It suggests that leaders don't need to be perfect to guide others, but they do need to be willing to learn. Too many leaders, especially in politics, and religion act as though their authority makes them infallible. But the best leaders are the ones who stay humble, who acknowledge their own blind spots and recognize that they, too, are still learning. A leader who refuses to examine their own flaws isn't really leading. They're just demanding obedience. We've seen what happens when leaders refuse to reflect on their own limitations. We end up with corruption, arrogance, and ultimately failure. The final analogy about bearing good fruit is maybe the most important. Leaders are ultimately judged not by their words alone or the promises they make, but by the overall impact they leave behind. Are they building communities? Are they fostering trust and inspiring positive change? Or are they leaving behind division, fear, resentment? If we want to be good leaders in our own communities, whether in our families, our workplaces, or as activists, we need to check our own biases. We need to stay open to learning, and we need to make sure that what we put into the world is actually making things better. That's the real test of leadership. So the main lesson I got from our gospel reading is that leaders must remember their own faults and limitations. It's easy to call out hypocrisy in others, but real leadership requires turning that same scrutiny on ourselves. Leaders who refuse to acknowledge their own faults or limitations, they can't be trusted to guide others. The best leaders aren't the ones who claim to have all the answers. They're the ones who remain open to learning, to growth, and to be held accountable. So whether we're leading in big ways or small, let's make sure we're leading with integrity. Because leaders must remember their own faults and limitations. All right, let's review the lessons we've talked about so far. In our first reading from the book of Sirach, the main lesson I came away with was, words eventually reveal a person's true intentions. In our second reading from 1 Corinthians, the main lesson I got was, no one can take your core values away. And finally, the main lesson I got from our gospel reading was, leaders must remember their own faults and limitations. When we stay true to our core values, we create a foundation for everything else. Our words, our actions, and how we lead. The things we say will always reveal what's inside us. So if we want to be trustworthy, we have to start with self-awareness and integrity. And while no one can take away our core values, we have to actively live by them if we want them to mean anything. Leadership isn't about pretending to be perfect or having all the answers. It's about being honest about what we know, about where we still need to grow, and how we can serve others in meaningful ways. Whether we lead in big or small ways, well, that's up to us. But one thing is certain. If we're grounded in our values, if we're open to learning, and if we're intentional with our words, we will leave a positive impact wherever we go. So let's step back and take another look at these readings overall and see if we can figure out what these messages really mean to us in our daily lives. To do this, I'll try to answer two questions. So what and now what? Okay, so what? Why should we care about any of this? Well, we should care about this because blind obedience has never led to progress. But for too many people, it's become a comfortable way of life. Many Christians they've been conditioned to follow church leaders without question, memorizing doctrine instead of thinking critically, obeying instead of engaging. And when those same people step into leadership roles, they don't lead with wisdom or integrity. They lead with arrogance, assuming they have all the answers, when in reality, they're just repeating what they were told. This kind of unchallenged dogmatism has fueled the rise of Christian nationalism, and the danger is very clear. They aren't trying to inspire people to follow. They're trying to seize control and force obedience through law and policy. This is important because there's a problem with simply opposing them. People need something to run toward, not just something to run from. If all we do is point out why the other side is wrong, we're not offering a vision of what's right. We need to talk about our values, about the world we want to create, and about what it truly means to lead with integrity, love, and justice. People don't just change their minds because they're told that they're wrong. They change because they're given a reason to believe in something better. We should care about this because if enough of us live by our core values, really live them, not just talk about them, we can start a ripple effect. Imagine if 1 million people acted with true integrity, rejecting blind obedience and leading others with honesty and love. If each of those 1 million people reached just one other person, suddenly 2 million people are thinking differently. And then 4 million, and then 8 million. This is how change happens, not through domination or fear, but through everyday people showing others a better way. This is important because right now, too many religious and political conservatives believe that everyone else is blind to the truth, but they are the ones walking around with logs in their eyes. And the worst part, they don't even see it. But if we want to break through that blindness, we have to do more than just yell at them. We have to help them see what they're missing. That starts with living out our values boldly, speaking truth, but speaking it with compassion, and proving through our actions that there is a better way to lead. The last question I try to answer is, now what? What are we supposed to do? Where do we go from here? Well, it's easy to look at the world and see what's wrong. Corrupt leaders, blind obedience, and people clinging to harmful beliefs, whether out of fear or just habit. But pointing out the problem isn't enough. If we truly want to be part of the solution, we have to ask ourselves, what are we leading people toward? Change happens when people are inspired, not just when they're told what to reject. And if we believe that living with integrity and core values can guide people away from harmful ideologies, then we need to ask, how are we showing them that in our lives? So with that in mind, here's your question for the week. When people listen to me, what do they take away from it? It's just a question to help focus a bit more on our overall sense of self-awareness. When people listen to you, whether in a conversation, on social media, or just through your actions, what do they take away from it? And ask yourself, am I only pointing out what's wrong, or am I giving them something better to believe in? I think this question matters because leadership isn't just about having the right opinions. It's about making a real impact. If all we do is call out hypocrisy, well, we might get a few people to agree with us, but will we actually change hearts and minds? Will we shift the culture towards something better? Taking time to reflect on how we communicate and what we represent can help us make sure we're not just fighting against something, but we're leading toward something better. It's easy to think of this in terms of all the problems society faces today, which can immediately feel overwhelming. Yes, we need to find better ways to address societal issues where our dogmatic Christian friends are clearly not seeing the truth. But when it comes to practicing giving people a vision you can lead them towards, well, we can find opportunities for that all over the place. Several years ago, where I worked was going through a massive reorganization. We were consolidating 9 separate IT organizations into one, which meant that we often ended up with 9 different ways of doing the same thing. People who were all legitimately IT experts were entrenched, arguing with each other over which way of doing things was better. And this went on for weeks. And I got tired of listening to it. So I tried to change the conversation. Instead of trying to sort through the arguments about which process was better, I started talking in terms of quality and continuous process improvement. I talked about how no process is perfect and how all of the true top-tier experts I've ever known are the first to admit that and the first to look for ways of improving their own processes. And I'd say things like, it seems like this is a great opportunity to look at the pros and cons of lots of processes that work very well. Wow, and see if we have the expertise to create an even better standard process for everyone to use. It's what I really believe. Right? Nothing is perfect. There's always room for improvement. And sometimes you can find ideas for improvements in the most unexpected places, but only if you're open to it. The point is that it was easy for me to talk about it because it's what I believed. And over the course of many conversations, well, people started to see that we really did have a lot of very smart people in the room. And rather than arguing over who does the work the best, what if we did come together and come up with an even better way based on the best of what we all know? My little campaign to focus on quality and continuous improvement worked so well that the CIO came to me a little while after that and asked me to stand up the first branch of IT quality assurance for the organization. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And it all started because I paid attention to what I was saying and how it impacted the people I was working with. I made a conscious effort to give them a different vision for what could be, instead of just trying to convince them that arguing wasn't the way to go. Anyway, as you go through the week, pay attention to your words and actions. Are you helping people see the log in their eye? Not by shaming them, but by offering them a clearer, better view? Are you leading with your values in a way that actually makes people stop and think? Because if we want to help people break free from blind obedience, we have to show them what freedom really looks like. Well, before I wrap things up, I'd like to leave you with one more thought. The famous French author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry once wrote, "If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea." There's a reason this quote resonates so deeply with most people. It captures the essence of what true leadership and inspiration really look like. Too often, people try to force change through criticism, pressure, or fear, but real transformation happens when people are drawn toward something greater. If all we do is point out what's wrong with the world, well, we might convince some people to abandon bad ideas, but where do they go next? What do they build instead? That's what our question this week is really about. When people listen to us, do they only hear what we oppose, or do they hear what we stand for? Are we guiding them toward a better vision, one that makes them want to engage, grow, and be part of something meaningful? At the end of the day, people don't just need to be told what not to do. They need a reason to believe in something better. They need a vision that makes them want to be part of the change. So let's make sure that when we speak, we're not just rejecting the broken systems of the past. We're helping to build a future worth longing for. All right, we've come to the end of this episode. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back again next week. And in the meantime, I encourage you to engage with our question for the week and pay attention to the important lessons you come across wherever you find them. You'll create a more purposeful and joyful life, and you'll start to feel more connected to the world and the people around you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mythologizing the Bible as we did a deeper dive into the readings for the 8th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Cycle C of the Roman Catholic Lectionary. Remember that to break through people's blindness, we have to help them see what they're missing. The Bible readings used for this episode are from the New Revised Standard Version, copyright 1989. The Division of Christian Education of the National Council of the Churches of Christ in the United States of America. Used by permission, all rights reserved worldwide. Thank you for listening. If you like this content, please consider telling a friend about it. The more people who hear the positive messages I'm sharing, the better. Mythologizing the Bible is a live-streamed series held most Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/thecodaproject. Every week, the audio of these Mythologizing the Bible presentations is released as a podcast. You can find it at thecodaproject.com. CODA stands for Creating Our Divine Alignment. When we learn to align our words and actions with our core values, that alignment feels absolutely exquisite. It feels divine. But it's a divine alignment that doesn't require belief in the supernatural. It's a divine alignment we have the ability to create for ourselves. To learn more, to subscribe to my mailing list, and to keep up on everything I'm doing with the Coda Project, please visit thecodaproject.com.